All right, so the first step here is to take this choke off. We've got 3 screws here. Then that guy's got to come off. This little clip here has to come off. And then this has to come off. Goes into the bowl. Now let's try and take it off without taking that apart. Okay, this little clip right there. So we're going to pull that off. Okay. And there's my little clip. That goes in the parts box. This off of here. That's loose. on the bottom side here, there's just a little clip that's holding that arm on, so I'm just going to pop that clip off. Okay. Here's the other little clip. Just gotta make sure I keep these guys straight because there's different size clips for different places. Should just pop right off, and voila. And we didn't have to take it apart, so that's good. Apart too much. There is this little gaskety 2-hole thing, a washer. Oh, there's the clutch arm that goes in the, or the, not the clutch arm, the choke arm. That goes in the part bowl. Well, let me actually show you where it goes. That was just right on here. Okay. Goes in the parts bowl. All right, just to make a couple things a little bit easier here to work with, I'm going to take this hose off. Looks pretty factory there, doesn't it? Some of these hoses, I'm just afraid because they're so old, I don't want to break any of them. All right, goes in our parts box. Next, I'm going to take the fuel filter off. All right, one fuel filter. I'm going to save that because I just put this on, so I know that's good. All right, now we're going to take this accelerator rod off, and there's a little clip here that holds that on. Take note here that it is in the second hole from the top. Alright, accelerator rod off, clip intact. Take note here, because I'm going to take this accelerator rod off, but just take note it's in the hole nearest that diaphragm. Let's just pop it off, and that goes in the parts box. Okay. Time to take the accelerator pump here off. 4 1/4-inch screws or bolts in here. Now, let's just take a look a little bit closer here. Oh, the gasket actually doesn't look bad. But yeah, you can see this, I don't know if you can see that, but this diaphragm is shot in here, and it's just flaking off. All right, now let's just take this gasket and diaphragm off. There's a spring behind here, so be careful. Okay, so that just pops right off. The spring is in with a little, it's a cone-shaped spring, little side facing out. Okay, that goes in the spare parts. And we'll put the diaphragm in the spare parts too. And here's where you can actually start to see. If you look in there, that's all little pieces of that diaphragm. All right, now it's time to take the cover plate off here. So 4 screws. I'm going to leave the ID tag actually on that screw. There's the original ID tag. So 4 screws and an ID tag in my parts box. 1/2 inch. And now that cover comes right off. All right. There's the cover plate. We'll set him aside. All right, now it's time to crack open our new kit here. So let's just gently I want to be really careful here. There's a lot of little pieces. I don't want to lose anything. Make sure that nothing is stuck to the plastic. The reason we did that is this gasket here we want to pull off in one piece and one piece. Okay, so there's our gasket. It's the old one. Now we got to look through the carb kit and find its match. Wow, what are the odds I'd pull it first time? Okay, make sure all the holes match up exactly, which they do. So this is the gasket we need. So here's the accelerator diaphragm that I took off of there, and you can see how messed up it is on this side. You can almost see right through it. And this is what was leaking, but if you compare it to what a new one looks like, focus, you can see the difference. I mean, this guy is totally trashed. That guy looks nice and healthy. So this should fix the problem. All right, now let's take this float assembly out here. I'm gonna pull that little metal clip. And that just pops right out from underneath that. That whole thing should just pull out. Okay. Note to self, this spring, this little wire guy here, was just seated up against the inside of the housing. Float looks like it's in good shape. I'm actually really surprised that this, I was expecting this to have a brass float in it, but it doesn't. My little spring fell off. Let's just put him back on there. Okay. That whole guy is going in its own bowl, because if anything falls off of that, I want to make sure I've got it. Now it's time to take the jets out. Let's make sure we can see down in there. Gotta take these two brass pieces out. Biggest screwdriver I got, because I don't want to mess up this brass. And turn that out. All right. There's jet number 1. Jet number 2. to my parts bucket. Alright, now we're going to take the needle valve and the seat out. Again, brass fittings, so I want to be careful not to mess that up. So I'll get a little bit closer look. There's this housing around it and the valve itself, or the seat. Okay, spare parts bucket. Alright, now we can remove this red plug. And pull. Now we can take off this venturi assembly. Screwdriver seated good. Okay. And that's what that looks like. Now if we look down inside that venturi, you can see there's a small rod when I wiggle it. So we're going to take that rod out, and there should be a check ball underneath it. So if I dump this out into my hand, there's what I have. I have the weight rod and this check ball. I want to be careful not to drop those because you don't get those in the kit, into the spare parts. Now, just to make life a little easier, I'm just going to remove this bottom gasket here. Take that off. Should be another one of these in the kit. Now for the fun part, I need to take this and these two mixture screws out. Now these I have to note the number of turns because they have to go back into the same position. Now I think what I'm supposed to do with these is actually turn them all the way in and count how many turns it is in. And then when I put them back in after I assemble it, I just take the same number out. So we're going to try and turn these in and see where we get. One, two, and a half. And that's in there pretty tight. So 2.5. And here's what that looks like. Now we're going to do the same thing on the left side. So we'll turn it clockwise all the way in. 1, 2, 3. It's pretty tight on the 3. So just a little bit past 3. Okay. There we've got the two of them together into our parts. All right, now this is called the power valve. That's the next thing that needs to come off. parts. We should be able to take this cover off. So that pops off. There's the cover. Put that in our parts. This is the power valve itself. That's got to come off. So we'll do that next. Okay, so I take the power valve off. I don't have a wrench big enough, so I'll use my handy dandy channel locks here. Here's what that power valve looks like. Okay, and the spare parts. Where that power valve was seated down, there's a little gasket here. This is considered fully disassembled now. You know, underneath where the venturi is, there's another little round gasket. So I want to take that off. I'll save him just in case there's not another one. So I'm just trying to make sure that I've got all the gaskets off, anything that's gonna deteriorate in when I soak it in my carb cleaner. Yep, looks like everything's off. And I think we're on to the soaking phase. So now it's time to soak all of this. Got my carb cleaner, soaker. Now this stuff is pretty nasty, so put rubber gloves on. I guess you're not supposed to touch it unless you absolutely have to, and I don't feel like having my skin fall off. Alright, now this comes with this little dipping basket, but there's no way I'm going to get the basket and the carb and everything in this little bucket, so I'm going to use my big bucket here. The carb in the bucket, you want to make sure that you have these open, so I'll just rest that in there like such. Cap in there too, and make sure the butterflies there are open. Try and put that in right next to it. Make sure they're open. So that's the big pieces. So now we're just gonna carefully dump the carb soak in here. Alright, now we're going to go through our spare parts here and grab everything that's metal. Let's take that and set it in there. All right, parts have soaked overnight. So now it's time to take them out and start scrubbing up. gonna do this with the rest of my parts. And I'll be ready to start putting it back together. And there's what she looks like. All nice and clean. Alright, so now we got this all wiped out and pretty clean. We're just going to take the anti-air compressor here and just blow out the rest of the jets and all that stuff. Alright, so I've got a nice clean body. You can see how nice and clean it is in there. On the back side, everything's nice and clean. I also took a piece of thin wire and I don't know if you can see those, but ran it through the holes where the jets are. Just make sure that there's no, that nothing is plugged there. All right. Now we got all the screws and the linkages and things like that. Now, got a million little screws and stuff in here, so I'm going to go ahead and get those cleaned up. Time to start with the reassembly. Get the carburetor upside down. First step is the power valve. So we got a new power valve with the carburetor kit, a new gasket. It goes on there. Okay. So that's on there. Pop the gasket on. And get the cap. I'm ready to tighten that down. And again, you don't want to over tighten, so just go a little bit past snug. All right, next step is to put the mixture screws back in. I'm going to do just the same thing I did when I took them out. I'm just going to put a little black mark on one side of the screw head just so that I know where my turns are. I'm going to turn them all the way in, and I'll back them off. This one needs to come out 3 turns, so it's at about 10 o'clock. So that's 1, 2, 3. And this one was 2.5 turns. So that's at about 11 o'clock. So that's 1, 2 and a half. So now we can reassemble the venturi. So we'll flip this guy over. There's a gasket for that. So we'll pop the gasket on. So now that's seated on. We pop that down like that. Okay. I've got my check ball. It goes right in this hole. All right. Then we've got the weight rod and the screw. Forgot the gasket that goes on that screw. And down she goes. Okay. Take my screwdriver. And this was tight, so we're going to tighten that right back down. Now we're ready to put the plug in for the accelerator pump. Now, you want to be really careful not to break this. I guess it's fairly easy to pull that off. So you want to be pretty careful here. I just put a little bit of my own kind of internal lube, if you will, on there. Gently pull with the needle nose until that shoulder comes through there. All right, so now we've got our plug in. Needle valve seat in, so we're just gonna open this other little parts bag here. We have the seat, we have this little gasket there. Now put that gasket on like that. Then there's this metal housing that it was in, like that. And I'm just going to hand tighten. Okay. And just tighten that down. Now we're ready to install our jets back in here. Jet number 1, jet number 2. Now we're just going to start these by hand. There. Now we have our jets in. Okay, now we're going to move this aside a little bit here. And we're going to rebuild this float assembly. So first we take that spring off. Now we're going to pull this clip off because they gave us a new one of those. Make sure to not drop that. And we'll just compare it, make sure it's exactly the same size. Yep. So we'll pop that. Pop that guy back on. All right. So I got that back on. So now we pop that spring on. We got to make sure that this end goes underneath, like that. Now we're ready to put our needle back in. Put the needle and this little wire clip goes on like that. And just hangs from there. And there we go. make sure that that part of the spring goes inside the housing there. And there. Let me tip this up. And just make sure that the needle is seated down inside of the housing there. So now we're just going to take this little wire clip here. Probably going to need a screwdriver to get a little bit of leverage on it and just push that down into that groove, and it just snaps right in. And there's our floating valve. Alright, now we need to just double check our float level. And according to the documentation, when I measured it before, it was right at a 1/2 inch. So just take and press down until it's seated. And then you measure from the top of the float to the housing. We are at exactly a 1/2 inch. Exactly a 1/2 inch. Time to put the cover plate back on. So we grab our new gasket and we grab our cover plate and line that up. 4 screws. Okay, so we got that. Put our main post back in. Well, I don't want to go crazy with it, but nice and snug. I knew I'd forget it. Forgot to put my ID tag back on. All right, time to put the accelerator pump back on. So we've got a brand new one and our spring. Now remember that spring goes in the little side out, and that goes right over that. And then the accelerator pump goes over the top of that. Push that in. And we've got our 4 little screws. There's our accelerator pump. Time to put the accelerator rod back on. I remember right. It was in the hole closest to the accelerator pump. It was in the second hole down, so I'm just going to take my needle nose and bend that clip out a little bit so I can get it around that. Seat it into that second hole. Time to put the choke assembly on. That slot should go over this arm. There we go. Before that falls off, just a little clip that's got to go on there. Seat that. Use a screwdriver to push it on there. Now we put the arm back on, put it in through the hole. Alright, so we gotta get this little clip on the arm here. Yep, there we go. Screw this guy back on. Now I'm going to get it started here just to kind of hold it. So now we're ready to hook up the arm. Goes in the front hole and goes right on there.